Before we begin, we have a favor to ask. If you like this podcast, please help us spread the word about the show. Go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review the show. Another way is to tell a fellow art teacher. Either way, it helps others find the show. The Blocks, Paper, Scissors podcast has a lot of information regarding teaching art, not just for tab teachers, but for anyone who is looking to further their understanding of children in a choice-based classroom. This show is about finding new ways to engage children and help them find their voice through visual arts.
All right.
Let's get this show on the road, shall we? Or not. We can just sit here and
You just worked 300 children through your art room today. You got to be a little bit gassed.
300 children, what the heck? It's nothing, right?
All in a day's work.
It's all in a day's work, right? So last time we were having a conversation, we were talking about, I think it was things that new tab teachers do that they probably should give up or do or not do. And I know we got through 3.
And when we say give up, we say, don't stress over it.
Right. And because the biggest change that a new tab teacher goes through is a personal change.
Yeah, because you are the embodiment. You have to assume the identity of an artist. You have to juggle all kinds of roles. Obviously, you're in a classroom with a multitude of children with all kinds of personalities and cognitive capacities and various physiological conditions and emotional dispositions. So that right there tells me, one thing I don't want to do is model behavior in which I antagonize somebody or get too pushy. Although some teachers, that's just my own feeling. What I'm offering up in my situation is an invitation to be creative.
It's funny when you talk about that, because I just had an incident today.
Oh, do tell.
With a student who, her mom works here at the school, and I was talking to her today. She had done something, and she had kind of ganged up against another student, and I was talking to all 3 of the students who were doing this at the time, and after I got done talking to them, they didn't get in trouble. I was just explaining to them that as students, as young people, we need to be tolerant of other people's ideas.
Right.
And I look back over there, and she's like in tears.
Oh, no.
And called her up, and I was talking to her, trying to comfort her and explain that she wasn't in trouble and that it's just part of growing up. She's 10 years old.
I was going to ask you how old she is.
And later I was talking to her mother, and her mother goes, "Oh, she's scared to death of you." I'm like, "Are you kidding?" She goes, "No." Apparently she got in trouble in 2nd grade, and ever since then she has been scared to death. Whatever I did, she internalized, and ever since then has been scared to death.
Oh,
so,
my.
Just something like that is now it's affecting this student 2 years later.
It's we're human beings.
Yeah.
Our teachers are human beings. We're expected to be super beings. I think the demands placed on all K-12 teachers are quite unreasonable at times, particularly when you think about the lives of children that are, most of their time is spent outside of school, and those things we can't control. And I'll mention one thing. The condition of their families and of their parents. And you think about this statistics from the United States Center of Disease Control. In the United States, nearly 47% of marriages in the United States end up in divorce. And those events affect children traumatically. And so the expectation that a teacher is going to somehow impress or imprint or develop IQ raise a child's intellectual capacity when they're going through trauma. There's no Clark. I've not seen any special programs in K-12 ed from Indiana Department of Education to ameliorate or to address that situation. Nothing. I've not heard anything. The impact of divorce on children is incredibly immense from a psycho-emotional standpoint, and the pressure that society and these politicians who's criticizing teachers. Give me about 5 minutes with them so I can straighten them out and talk to them about the shortcomings of their policies, which don't address the whole child. When you think about the demands of testing mandates, and here I am getting off of my soapbox, and we're supposed to be talking about art class, but and the importance of art class.
Right.
And here I'm talking about this, but just that fact alone, we haven't even talked about children as human beings and the effects of things like poverty and food insecurity, but just that one fact alone with parents and divorce, how that can affect a child. Mm-hmm. It is incredibly painful for a child, and they wear the emotional scars of their parents' divorce for years and years and years, and it affects the child for a long time. And we don't really hear much from policymakers about that. They may there's a new movement, I think, to address social emotional needs in children, and they're trying to do it through computer-based education. I'm thinking, no. I think if you lower class sizes, have more child-centered, more opportunities for multisensory learning, children to have collaboration experiences, more experiences for children to experience the humanities in school. I think that would be beneficial to them, particularly children who are experiencing trauma from family dysfunction or family structure or family difficulties like divorce.
Right. And we see that in our classroom as acting out.
Yes.
And one of the things, to bring it back on track, that we were going to discuss is how do we handle things like when kids don't clean up their centers or when they do something wrong. A lot of people will close a center or some other way penalize a student for behavior. Mm-hmm. But not only when you close a center, does that penalize the student, but it also penalizes all the other students.
Yeah.
So Johnny may have gotten in trouble and is having a really bad day and doesn't want to clean up, doesn't want to put his things away. We need to be mindful of why those students are behaving in that way and not think of, well, I'm just going to close the center, because what happens, it's easy to do that. It's easy to say, we're just going to close the center. That's not being helpful to the student. that's just making things easier for the teacher, which to me is not in the teaching for artistic behavior type pedagogy.
Right.
We promote working through mistakes. And if a kid screws up, now's the time to teach that student that, you're going to support them no matter what.
Yeah.
We need to ask the question, why is the student behaving this way? Why is it, is this a pattern with the student? I've had kids who are notoriously don't want to clean up. That's just the way they are.
Yeah.
So you might have to give them 10 minutes heads up, as opposed to expecting them to conform with everyone else who can clean up in 5-10 minutes.
Sometimes a teacher intervention, direct interaction with the child that is notorious for not cleaning up.
Mm-hmm.
You just get over to their workspace and say, all right, let's go ahead and start. And, model cleanup behavior for the child. And sometimes it just takes repeated interventions like that.
One of the things that's really important if you're going to run a tab classroom is setting up routines.
Yeah.
And we all have, especially in the elementary classroom, you're trying to set routines that the kids can follow and can do independently.
Uh-huh.
I expect them to come in. They don't have to be silent, but I have assigned seats. It's alphabetical.
Uh-huh.
I just have them come in. They know where their seats are, and they can get to their seat so we can get started quickly.
Uh-huh.
And then once they're seated, I start my 5-minute lesson. They know that it's always going to be 5 to 7 minutes at the beginning of class is my time.
Uh-huh.
And then once that goes, then they're free to go about and move around the classroom.
Uh-huh.
That's hard for some kids because they like their assigned seat. And that's
Yeah.
fine. They will stay in that seat forever.
Uh-huh.
Even year after year after year after year, they will go to that assigned seat. But, setting up those clear, easy to follow routines in every center.
Uh-huh.
You think about your classroom is a routine in itself and how it's organized.
Uh-huh.
And as students work in their studio, the teacher should be observing those students and how they work.
Uh-huh.
Where are routines that can be simplified, routines that need to be modified? If there's too many people in a certain area, then you need to think about separating materials so that it's not a huge bottleneck. Moving different centers, more popular centers, away from each other so they're on opposite sides of the room. So even if you have 30 kids in your classroom, you've got 15 kids on one side, 15 kids on the other, if that's how it's going to work. So I'm always, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I'm still modifying routines.
Uh-huh.
It takes time. And once the kids get it, then you don't have to worry about that as a system,
Uh-huh.
because it just happens.
They have developed an awareness themselves of what their roles and expectations are in Mr. Freilich's art room, and they are able to be their own agents and operate independently after they know that Mr. Freilich is done with his lesson. And over time, I can imagine, and particularly with little kids, as they mature intellectually, they start to understand.
It's interesting to see kids year after year where I see an issue that needs to be fixed. I will hesitate to move that during the year. Any large change can cause a lot of ripple effects down the road.
Yeah. And knowing the lay of the room is important if you're an artist working in your studio, which we're giving children opportunity to become their own artists and express their own ideas, so that when they need materials to realize their ideas or to assist them in whatever it is they're constructing or building or creating, the art room is essential in being, being a seamless component of this process. And that's kind of like the process of cognition when you're involved in developing this idea. You're in and about the work related to the idea and all the knowledge components involved in that. So this whole the process of cognition is this process of going about expressing this idea and being involved in it. So let's say my idea is related to my interest in dinosaurs, and I'm making a picture about a T-Rex battle with a Triceratops, and all of my language, all the literacy that I've been reading about, all the words that I've been doing research with, all of the images that I've imagined in my mind related to my study of dinosaurs. I'm in the process of conveying my ideas related to dinosaurs in the art room now, creating this picture and having the art room organized by my art teacher to have paints available, to have scissors available, to have all the necessary elements so that my time-sensitive thought can be expressed in Mr. Freilich's art room at this time is so critical to my learning experience with respect to my ideas about art and dinosaurs and my reading, my research. So it all culminates in this very important artistic event. My thinking is, this tab classroom, having the idea of having materials readily available for the child that they know that they can in a split second obtain materials because they know where everything is.
Right. It's a working studio, and that's how we want them to think. It's their space. I don't want my kids to think that art only happens in my room. I encourage them to make art outside a classroom, bring it in,
right,
take it home. The tab classroom is a different place to be. Not only is a safe place to try out new things and ideas, but the more comfortable a student is, the more apt they are to create, to take those risks.
Absolutely.
We're not a product-based pedagogy. It's a process-based, and which kind of takes us to one of our things that new tab teachers need to kind of move away from is that preconceived idea of what a project should look like. If you're teaching a technique and you've taught this technique to kids in an old style of teaching, if you've done projects like this in this technique, I try to steer away from making that project in front of the kids because I know the kids will want to copy that. If I do a Starry Night picture and if I duplicate Van Gogh's Starry Night and we're going to use crayon batik, the kids are thinking that that's what I want them to do. I will show them a technique of crayon batik, but it's important that I say, now you show me what you can do with it.
Yeah.
And not just copy me. I don't want them to use my ideas. I want to see their ideas.
Right.
So less of me, more of them. There's a saying that a good teacher knows how to get the kids excited and then get the heck out of the way and let them do it. So we're just showing them the technique and letting them finish their ideas.
And that's how a tab teacher integrates new learning is, through the large group lesson, the whole class lesson at the beginning, and then through smaller demos and one-on-one can introduce more learning depending on the child's needs. But yeah, essential things like how to use paint from the paint center. Here, we'll do a whole group lesson. How do I access paint? How do I mix? How do I use white to create tints? How do I use black to create shading to darken a value? Though I think those are basic, fundamental skills, art skills that are really important and essential. Those can be shared in large group activities. And
where do you use a tint? How do you use a shade? You might make a shade, or you might make a tint. Why would I need a darker color?
Yeah.
Thinking about looking at something and looking at things objects in real life and in real space, where would I use a darker blue, a darker shade of that blue?
And that might be something you might discuss in a one-on-one situation.
Right. Or as they get older.
Thinking about young children, their work is pretty much symbolic thinking about Lowenfeld's stages of creative development. They're in pre-symbolic stage. They're doing a lot of scribbles. Only after they reach adolescence, they're trying to attain to draw things more realistically. And that's where I'm really more interested in. I'm trying to get away from realism, but when I'm teaching, I teach both realism and intuitive art making, mark making to them, and I'm trying to emphasize the importance of expressing the inexpressible through intuitive art making, because a lot of kids have lacked the patience to draw realistically, naturalistically. And so even if I share with them observation drawing and the secrets of Albrecht Dürer, the secrets of the Renaissance artists, using grids and optical devices, although we've been using our cell phones for optical devices, artistic relationship.
I think the idea of intuitive painting is really interesting, because depending on the art program that you go through, a lot of that intuitive creativity might be stamped down.
Yeah.
Because of preconceived ideas of an art teacher. This is what good art looks like.
Yeah.
This is how you should be doing it. If it doesn't look like the one that I made, then it's not good.
Uh-huh.
So that's why it looks like chaos in our rooms.
It's controlled, differentiated learning.
Exactly. Not everyone's going to be attracted to that.
So I know that we covered this topic in a podcast a while ago. And we were talking about the unmotivated student.
The kid who appears like he doesn't want to do anything, or he doesn't do anything. I think we all have those. And I know a lot of teachers are frustrated with those students, because we falsely assume that all kids should be busy.
Yeah.
But just because their hands are busy doesn't mean their minds aren't thinking. And I think we talked about incubation a little bit.
Yeah.
And how maybe just sitting down and talking with that student and figuring out what's going on. Maybe he's really tired. I've had kids who come in and I had a student not too long ago whose house burnt down.
Oh my gosh.
And
that's horrifying.
And he didn't want to do anything. He was just kind of spent.
Yeah.
Because he was up all night.
He's drained. What a horrifying story. But I feel for the child.
But to penalize someone for not actually doing something at that moment is not something you want to get in the practice of doing. At least I don't think we should be so callous as to not talk to the student and find out really what's going on.
Right.
Maybe they don't feel good. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they're thinking of something or incubating.
Controlling a child's mind, getting into their thoughts, controlling what, they're controlling their thinking. That's pretty much what happens in school. The child is outside the decision-making process, central to the activities that they are basically coerced to participate in. But sometimes they're compelled to be in the building. Now, having said that, a lot of kids love school. They love it. The last time a large study was done on engagement was the high school survey of student engagement, which was done between, I think, 2004 and 2012, something like that. But they stopped doing the survey because it revealed that nearly 70% of high school seniors were disengaged through school. And they were talking about their entire experience. A lot of them were sharing statements about their experiences throughout their entire K-12 education experience. And so it's from a child's perspective, engagement. There's a difference between, I think, in authentic learning, I think, is almost like spiritual. And it should be a spiritual event. You think about learning. William Pinar, he talks about learning as a spiritual event, and it should be. It should be, a moment where you are totally spiritually, emotionally, intellectually connected. It's a full, total body experience, I think. But what is happening in schools is children are just, because of testing mandates, they are, behavior modification techniques where grades are used to motivate children to participate. Hey, you don't do this, you're going to get an F. The grade is used as a stick. It's used as a stick.
If you want kids to do well, you need to make it an internal motivation as opposed to external. But there are some kids who are motivated by grades, but that's how they've been raised.
Yeah.
And brought up through the system.
Carrots and sticks. The tab classroom can be life-changing for many children in that learning can get back to its to a more natural way of being, and there doesn't have to be a I always get nervous around people who use the word rigor a lot. I'm not quite certain I know what they mean when they use rigor. Rigor in my mind means that the child is indeed of their own consent. They are participating going beyond the given information. Now that to me is a rigorous experience. When you have to use sticks and carrots to get kids to learn, I think that's problematic because then you're in the business of control, and you become an authoritarian. And I think learning should be a democratic process, and that's why I'm such an advocate of tab art programs, because there is a huge degree of democratic decision making going on in a tab classroom. But back to the business of observing children, like you're talking about your student whose house just burned down. What a horrible thing to happen to you, and I would be traumatized if my home had burned down, and especially all the problems associated with finding a new home. My goodness, you're staying up late. You don't have.
They just had the clothes on their back. Thank goodness we were able to help them out.
Uh-huh.
But for that day, he just didn't want to do anything, which was totally fine.
Uh-huh.
And I wasn't going to penalize him for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
You said you had a story you had to tell. Is this a
Today.
good story?
Yes. So today, my last period class, okay, 7th period, the kids have been, the whole school day has been, they're a little bit there's a little bit of road rash on them. They're road weary. It's been a long day. So 7th period class, they come in and I do my large group lesson. I tell them, your portfolios are due. And by the way, we got a big art show coming up. And they know I expect them to participate in the art show. Now, I'm not going to penalize. But I told them, I said, look, you're going to disappoint me if you don't participate. I mean, we've had, 3 months of just full bore art making. And, I expect you to produce, or to refine just one piece to exhibit, to show people, the cool things that happen in our art program. And also to provide the school with an aesthetic experience. All the fellow students and faculty and community members who will come to the art show. They love seeing the art. And so after I do my spiel, I talk about those things, and I tell them we got the centers there open, the rooms ready for you, and so let's see what happens. Let's let the genie out of the bottle. So sure enough, the studio's open. So everybody's starting to work on their art. Not everybody. There's a couple of pockets, a couple of tables where there's not much of nothing going on. And then, to my chagrin, because I have high hopes for everybody, then I observe 4 young ladies pull out a deck of cards. They're old aviator cards. These look like they're from Las Vegas. I don't know. But they start playing cards. I said, oh, that looks interesting. They're playing cards. And they're like, is this a new game you invented? Oh, yeah, Mr. Gaw, it's a new game we invented. We created this game. Oh, it looks like hearts they're playing. Some game of hearts. And so they dealt a couple hands. So what my intervention was, I didn't say, put those things away. I did not do that. So I try to be counterintuitive when, my first instinct is to say, put the cards away, get some art materials out, and no, I didn't do that. I tried to be sly about this. So I sat down with some cardboard squares and some paper mache, and I started making module relief sculptures in front of them. And I started, talking to myself while I'm making these. And of course I'm, hard to miss. 200-pound bald man sitting right there. And I'm talking away, making my little sculptures in front of them. And so after, I think, 3 hands, they put the cards away and they each started making art. And so I didn't tell them to put their cards away. They put the cards away on their own. And they each started doing, one was doing tape stenciling, the other was doing paper mache sculpture, the other was doing a geometric painting. The other young lady was doing a drawing. And so without me having to give them a directive, a reprimand, they, I modeled artistic behavior in front of them, and that was my intervention, and it worked.
It kind of reminds me of I just finished reading that new book by Daniel Pink.
Uh-huh.
It's called When. There's something else in the title, but I don't know what the rest of it is. But it really talks about how people, or when people are creative. You think about in a creative classroom, not everyone's going to be creative at the same time.
Yeah.
And learning the type of person you are,
Yeah.
you can set that up. So maybe they just weren't ready to start. But at that point, I have to get a cup of coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
2 cups, 6 cups, something like that.
Me too.
Other creatives, they'll go for a walk.
Uh-huh.
They'll sit down and read, or other people will get up first thing 6 o'clock, hit the studio and start work for 4 hours, stop, and that's it. They're done for the day. It just depends on how these people are, and to expect students to all be able to do the same thing at the same time is illogical.
Yeah, it's like you can't summon creativity on demand from your students. The expectation is there. You are providing opportunity, inviting them, using inspirational interventions for them. You've got the room set up, for them to access, so they can come in with the mindset and the cognitive tools to be creative. So they themselves exhibit creativity and become creative beings. And so that's the important aspect of TAB is you're developing trying to help develop creative beings instead of creative objects. And that's the whole point of teaching for artistic behavior.
That's a great point to end on. We are going to finish this conversation in the upcoming podcast. Hopefully in the near future, we will have guests as soon as our special guest feels up to it.
We have one special guest in mind right now. We're trying to pin her down.
Yep. We'll get that all taken care of in the next few podcasts. Hopefully our listeners will still be around by then.
Oh. Do we have any listeners listening to us?
I don't know. No, we do have some followers from Podbean, which I totally appreciate them.
We do.
So do you have anything you'd like to tell anyone, add anything before we sign off? And
I looked in your room today. It looked like the children were very active today in your room.
Yeah, they're active every day. First grade. All right.
I don't have anything profound to say.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Blocks, Paper, Scissors podcast. If you have a question or topic you would like Clark and Clyde to discuss, please send it to Clyde at cgaw@newpal.k12.in.us. The Blocks, Paper, Scissors podcast is available from Podbean and iTunes.
Sometimes that shark, he looks right at you, right into your eyes. You know the thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, it doesn't seem to be living until he bites you.
Medic. The poetic musings of Clyde Gaw. All you need now is a patch over your eye and a peg leg and be ready to go.